Poppy usually ran his regular errands on Wednesdays. He knew better than to get in Carmen's way while she was deep cleaning. Today, thankfully, he actually had people to see and no excuses to dream up. Often he told Carmen he was running errands and then asked Rushmore to drive him to the Schwitz. Today, though, he was meeting with the accountant. Abraham Azizi's office was in a professional building on Michigan Avenue, midway between Dearborn and Detroit. Poppy left Rushmore at the car and rode the elevator to the 7th floor and the offices of McGregor, Fakir, and Associates. A slender young man was sitting at the front desk. Who knew that men were secretaries? "I have a meeting with Mr. Azizi," Poppy announced, standing at the desk. The assistant made an inter-office call and stood officiously. "Please follow me, sir." As the secretary escorted him down the hall, Poppy thought about Milt. What a funny thing to retire and move away all of a sudden. Milt and his wife just bought that new house on the golf course about 3 years before. Suddenly they announced that they were selling the house and moving out of state, and hey, by the way, his entire fund was going to require a new manager. It all needed to be liquidated, of course, first, although the reasoning Milt gave was akin to that of a toddler explaining physics to a monkey. Either way, the Greenbergs were gone and he had to find a new investment counselor. He was still trying to figure out that part of the puzzle. But he liked Azizi, whom he had known now for several months. The kid was sharp in Poppy's estimation. Abraham stood in the doorway of his office, holding the door open. "Mr. Ashner, it's great to see you again. Come, have a seat." The secretary inquired, "May I bring either of you some coffee?" And both declined. But as Poppy settled into the Saarinen chair facing Abraham's desk, he wished he had said yes. Even wearing a sweater, he felt chilly. This foolishness about the air. Everyone turns their offices into an icebox. "I appreciate your hard work," he thanked the accountant. "Give it to me straight. How verkackte is this mess of my granddaughter's?" Abraham smiled at the Yiddish term and folded his hands together. "I'm a straight shooter, and I know you are as well. Here's what I see. Eva cannot sustain the studio as it is right now and support herself and the baby at the same time. But there are ways to resolve this, and I have shared some of those with Eva already." I'll be noted that he used the name Eva twice, both times quite unself-consciously and comfortably. Not Miss Ashner or your granddaughter, but her given name. He nodded and leaned toward the younger man. "Tell me what you think we should do." He was ready to accept whatever tough choices were recommended. "Well, for starters, there's too much overhead. Eva is, I guess I can say this, a rather impulsive young woman and is used to having her way." Poppy nodded again, slowly, a smile in his dark eyes. "And there are expenses, personal and professional, that she needs to learn to live without. The larger issue really is the potential for future intake at the studio, and your granddaughter's ability or inability to change her goals, to be flexible and open to different ideas. I would recommend that she take on a partner, one that specializes in contemporary dance for teens and young adults, and who will bring cash flow to help drive new tuitions and marketing. Or she can sell the studio. She has indicated that she might reach out to another dance instructor, someone that she knows. I'm curious to see how receptive this woman might be and whether Eva will go through with it. She might decide to sell, maybe. If she sells, how much money does that give her to live on? I don't see her getting more than $5,000 for everything, including her student lists. That's fair pricing in today's world." Poppy slowly reclined, his eyes never leaving Abraham's. "Not good, not good." Abraham shook his head in concurrence. "No, but there is a third option as well. She can cut her personal sessions to 3 afternoons and Saturday mornings, then take a part-time job the other days. The studio could be leased or sublet out to other instructors, like the yoga instructor she's got there now. If she could get a job working maybe 20-30 hours a week, she could afford her studio rent and personal expenses, plus sock away the earnings from the studio for the future. She needs to generate at least 75% of her overhead from sublets. That is, if you think this is something she'd be interested in doing. Oh boy, Poppy thought, this one has no idea. But he merely added, I will talk with her about it. Maybe if she finds something she enjoys. Well, we'll see. Abraham then pushed back slightly from his desk and crossed his legs. She's hard-headed. I see now what you meant when you first hired me. Maybe she's grown more responsible since she had the kid. Just my observation, of course. He blushed lightly and looked down at his shoes. Ah, yes. Poppy saw it then. This Mosul has been doing a lot of observing. He smirked to himself with reserve. Suddenly he thought, chiding himself, and what of this? She can do worse than a nice accountant with the sharp clothes he wears and the fancy boy bringing coffee. She could do well to spend her time with someone who knows how to add things up properly. Poppy really did not have anything against Muslims and Middle Easterners. He dealt with a fair number of Arabs during his years in business, and half were damn fools and the other half were good, fair-minded people. In fact, the entire population, Muslim, Christian, and Jew, could be divided up into the same halves. He was a strong Israel-supporting Jew, but he also knew what happened when people assumed certain things about you because of the name you called your God. He prided himself on being a mensch, on being fair. But ultimately it came down to how obstinate that granddaughter of his was. God forbid he take up an issue with her dating an Arab. Well, she'd make sure to accelerate that relationship out of spite. He stood up and put out his hand to shake Abraham's. You let me know what you think is best. I'll talk to my granddaughter and get her to see reason. They made plans to visit again in a month, and Abraham accompanied Poppy toward the lobby. Outside, Poppy found Rushmore standing at the DeVille, his hip leaning into the sedan door. He was finishing a cigar, and as Poppy approached, the driver tossed the smoking remnant into the parking lot. Where to? Rushmore asked, as he stepped around to help Poppy into the passenger side. Poppy gingerly pulled himself into the comfortable, worn, gray leather seat. I have another appointment at the Bellcrest. Drive me there. They meandered down the city streets, reeking of trash and diesel fumes. Rushmore pulled up to the building, 13 stories high. What business did Poppy have here, he pondered. Poppy had his hand already on the silver-plated inner door handle, ready to leap out. Here, he handed Rushmore a thin strip of paper. It was his ticket for the dry cleaner. He unfurled a $100 bill from his money clip and added, after you pick up the shirts, go to Gratiot in St. Aubin and buy a Motorola. Rushmore squinted into the light streaking in from the open door. What's that? A cellular telephone. Tell them you want the new model. A cell phone? Rushmore knew of such things, but had never used one. Why on earth would Poppy want one of those? The only people he ever called were his granddaughters. Such a strange, strange request. Rushmore merely shrugged and accepted the paper and the money. He got the feeling that Poppy really wanted him to go kill some time, and that begged the question, why? Who was in that building? And what business did Poppy have with them? Rushmore noticed that Poppy stepped from the Cadillac and didn't look back. And damned if he didn't practically skip into the apartment lobby, where a doorman dressed in a burgundy suit opened the door for him. A white doorman. Poppy made light chit-chat with the doorman, who led the way into the elevator and up to the 6th floor. Have a good afternoon, sir. The doorman tipped his hat, and Poppy turned and waltzed down the hall. He knocked on a door, a small mezuzah nailed onto the frame. There is my Poppy. The woman inside opened the door and cooed at him. She was incredibly tanned, with highlighted hair. She was perhaps in her 40s and possibly much older, but clearly took good care of her skin. A tiny bundle of fox-colored fur with a needle nose yipped and barked and ran circles around the woman's feet. The woman threw her athletic arms around Poppy's neck and bussed him several times on his cheek and forehead. He thumped the top of her arms 3 times in response. She wore white tennis apparel and bare feet with rust-colored polish on her toes. Thin gold bangles lined up both arms. Come inside to the massage table. I have everything waiting for you, she invited in her warm and vaguely South American accent. She pulled Poppy into her front room, and the door slowly sealed shut across plush carpet. Rushmore, meanwhile, drove to the mobile phone store. He was immediately confused. This was a business? It was in a concrete block building. Everybody in the store seemed to have something incredibly important going on. The clerk asked questions like, they were in a government deposition. Do you need the phone for this, for that, for what? Rushmore didn't understand. Finally, he instructed the young salesman, who wore a baseball cap with the bill turned toward the back and dirty, dirty jeans. You pick it out, and don't ask me no more questions. He felt confused and grumpy. Next, he drove to the dry cleaners. Mr. Tam was working the counter, and his wife was behind it. Mrs. Tam was the brains of their operation, but Mr. Tam was the nice one who handled the customers. Yes, sir, I help you. Good afternoon. Rushmore thrust the ticket toward him. Mr. Tam frowned. Oh, no Mr. Ashnear today. Oh, no, very sad not to see my favorite customer today. He's busy. I just need the shirts. Oh, yes, I get them. Mr. Tam brought out a dozen bagged and cleaned shirts, hanging on their slim hangers, the rustle of crepe paper not enough to obscure the sounds of Mrs. Tam muttering in the background in a language Rushmore could not decipher. Vietnamese, for God's sake? Cambodian? Chinese? He left, disagreeable and perplexed about where he left his employer that afternoon. Was Ashner meeting an old crony? Why did he suddenly need a mobile phone? Rushmore looked down at the passenger's seat, where the cardboard box sat there, appearing almost otherworldly. What was happening? The boss suddenly had all these social engagements and new interests. Rushmore wondered why Poppy didn't share what was going on, or invite him to whatever meeting he was attending. Plus, he still had 30 minutes to kill.